Hello everyone, Ember here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I'd like to take a look at the many Heatrans of GLC, as suggested by someone. Now, what I will say is I don't have very many suggestions left to cover, so if you'd like to suggest a Pokemon to feature in the series, then do let me know. If no one suggests anything, then that's also fine because I made a brief list of all the Pokemon that could, in theory, be covered in the series, and it was nearly 100 basically. Not including all the new Pokemon that are getting released at the time. So, yeah, there's quite a lot of Pokemon to cover in this series. But yeah, this is the many Heatrans of GLC. So, what is GLC? For those of you who don't know, it's a single prize only no Roblox format. It is singleton, except for basic energy, because that would just be painful, of course, and only one type per deck. So, Heatran is in this lucky position where if you happen to be a fan of Heatran and you want to build a GLC deck with Heatran in it, you can choose either metal or fire, which is quite cool. So, you do get a nice choice there. And this first Heatran we can take a look at is from the XY Phantom Forces expansion, and this one is very subpar. But one thing I will say is at least Steel Drop can do 80 damage for Metal Double Colors. It's not great, but I'll give it the benefit of the doubt because, thank goodness, there's at least some cool stadiums for metal types. There's Mount Coronet, which is probably the best one. But you've also got stuff like Crystal Cave, which is obviously pretty decent as well. So yeah, I would definitely say this Heatran gets some saving grace, even though it's not a particularly great card, but the artwork is kind of funny. I do love how he's like awkwardly posing on a cliff and about to fall off, maybe. But yeah, it's a fun card. But aside from that, yeah, nothing too crazy. And we can move on to the Heatran from Ultra Prism. And this one's kind of cool, actually. Did get a promo artwork as well because it was a pre-release promo. Can use the attack Guard Press that does 30 damage, and this takes 30 less damage from attacks during your opponent's next turn, which can be quite nice when comboed with stuff like Metal Frying Pan to take an additional minus 30. So you end up taking minus 60, and then that's not including other ability modifiers and stuff. So, this can get quite resistant, but there's just way better options. And this is just here if you happen to, I guess, own the pre-release promo, or you really like this Heatran for whatever reason, because Boiling Impact is just a bit terrible. And, God Press, it's not the worst thing in the world, but, with a basic like this, you just want to be doing a bit more in the game, really. But yeah, not the worst thing I've ever seen. And then we have a bit of deja vu because they went and released a one in Forbidden Light, which is beat for beat the exact same card, but just as a fire type. So, if you happen to prefer fire types, then this Heatran is for you. But everything down to the artwork is identical, so it's a wee bit boring. There is other options for reducing damage as well, by the way. I forget what it's called, but there was a helmet that came around in the Sword and Shield era, which basically just lets you take minus 30 damage. So, you don't have to use the frying pan for fire types, thankfully, but it's just here as an option. Again, nothing too crazy, but nothing terrible either. Then we have a Heatran from Celestial Storm, and I think this one is honestly a bit more interesting and a bit more fun. As the attack Steelworks, 1 Metal Energy, allows you to look at the top 4 cards of your deck and attach any number of Metal Energy you find there to one of your Pokemon. Then you get to shuffle the other cards back into your deck, which is really nice because it doesn't mean you're like discarding valuable resources. And there is good synergy here. We've got Academy at Night to fiddle the Metal Energy from your hand to the top of your deck, which is cool. Even got Mallow, so you can guarantee 2 Metal Energy out of your deck. You can also use like the new, what's it called? Cipher Maniacs Deciphering from Temporal Forces, I think it's called. So yeah, that's a nice option. So you've got plenty of good options at least with this, and because you probably want to play Metang in GLC as well, that's also looking at the top 4 cards of your deck, but it's doing it every turn. So again, you just get more synergy out of that. So yeah, definitely think this Heatran's honestly worth it in some situations, and honestly a pretty good and pretty efficient, honestly, way of accelerating energy, if you're not using Again Zone and things. So yeah, kind of cool. Then we have a one from Lost Thunder, and this one does get the prize of, I think, being the best fire type Heatran, which isn't saying much because it's not a particularly great card, but it's not every day, right, that you see fire types doing spread damage. Lava Bone does 60 damage and 30 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. It's okay, if you get to use this multiple times, then it can be quite nice. And then Heat Bazooka for a whopping 4 energy does 150, and you have to discard the top 5 cards of your deck, which might have some synergy here and there, but at the end of the day, probably not. Fighting for Rebel, I single this card out just because you might want to make this a bit tankier, and this Lava Burn would be doing 70 damage, and you'd also get the 30 snipe while also having 190 HP, which honestly sounds kind of appealing. Not 190, what am I saying? 180 HP. But, which is still kind of tanky, and try and use Lava Burn as many times as you can, really, before it gets KO'd. But yeah, quite a fun spread option, and definitely the best one for fire types, at least in my opinion. Then we have a one from Sword and Shield Darkness Ablaze. This one's kind of fun. Raging Flare doing 80, that was a number, 80 damage, and then 10 more damage for each damage counter on Heatran itself. These attacks are always fun to mess around with, but of course they're super risky because as soon as you're doing respectable damage, Heatran will then be in KO range to basically just be knocked out by a feather. So it's a bit of a pain, but it is one of those situations where if you survive a hit, then you can do a lot of damage, but the next attack your opponent uses will just carry you, no matter what. So it's a bit of a pain, and at that point I'd rather just use this one, but it's still kind of fun. Again, got some synergy with Fighting Fury Belt. There's also other ones that can give you a bit more HP if you really want it, but aside from that, nothing too crazy really with the Darkness Ablaze one. Then we have the one from Brilliant Stars, and this one again is kind of fun. Guard Claw doing 30 damage, and you take 30 less. Again, Metal Frying Pan is probably your best synergy. But then Iron Hammer we see is kind of cool. 2 metal in the colorless does 80 damage, and if this Pokemon has any fire energy attached to it, it does 80 more. So you can do 160 for 3, which is quite nice. And I would definitely say Crispin is probably your best way of accelerating energy to this. So, either you accelerate the metal from the deck and you have the fire in hand, or vice versa. I think it's definitely the best option you have really from Stellar Crown. So, yeah, honestly, aside from that, like maybe Raihan, I think, is the only other option really. But yeah, I think that's the best way of really getting the fire energy on there, to use Iron Hammer if you really want to. So, yeah, quite a fun option. Then we have the one from Twilight Masquerade, which is certainly the best Heatran, and it's not even close. Bit of a shame, but if you don't happen to own this Heatran, by the way, or you don't want to use it, that's fair. We've gone through some pretty fun Heatrans in this video already. But for those of you who don't know what this one does, it has the very powerful ability Incandescent Body, which says whenever it's attacked, your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned, so they will automatically take 20 damage no matter what, which is kind of fun. And then Steel Burst says discard all metal energy from this Pokemon, and it does 50 damage for each card you discarded in this way. And it does have, of course, to have synergy with the Magen Zone, but also the Matang as well, with the ability Metal Maker. So, definitely the strongest Heatran by a landslide. But, also one of the coolest ones, actually. Like, that Auric is amazing. But I do think there's some fun ones, actually. Like this one's kind of cool. I would say this one's funny. Well, it can be funny. This one is my favorite, to be honest. Like Lava Burn's just a fun spread option. This one is a decent, secondary option. Also got a one from Thin Light, which I thought was a bit boring. The one from Ultra Prism is kind of cool because, of course, that Magen Zone is from Ultra Prism. So if you want to just use this Heatran for a time being, then you could. But yeah, some nice options, really. Just going to skip the first one that we looked at because it's so boring. But yeah, that's all the Heatrans there. Also, I do a new set review for GLC with each new release, so by the time this video goes up, I should have done the one for Stellar Crown already. So subscribe if you're interested in being updated. Might do a two-parter for the next set though, because I think Paradise Dragona probably needs its own video, and then I'll do one for Supercharged Breaker in its full. But yeah, this is now a series to stay, by the way, so let me know which Pokemon you'd like to see again. There is a list about getting through them, and a playlist has been made as well if you just want to see the full series in a binge. And if you want to dive into the competitive side, OmniPoke and the format content creator Tricky Jim have both done fantastic videos and guides for each type. And yes, I will repeat that every video because it's worth mentioning. Also, if you want just any clarifications on rules for GLC, any deck advice or anything, Tricky Jim is your best bet. So yeah. But yeah, thank you for watching. Let me know what you think down below. Is there any Pokemon you'd like to see? It's been Power, and yeah, thank you for watching.